The shooter genre is one that I've come full circle with. I find myself enjoying them the most and have more often than not gravitated towards these games. Whether it's first or third person, or when it's single player or multiplayer, I tend to enjoy them no matter what. The only barrier between that enjoyment is the quality of the game itself and whether I like it or not. Recently, we've seen a lot of movement-based games coming out of the woodwork, first-person games more specifically, where it's more or less just about the movement itself. You look at, say, Cluster Truck or Refunked or Speedrunners from Hell, or to an extent, the Mirror's Edge games. They all reward fluid and dynamic movement and fast clearing of the level. Usually with some exceptions, of course. They remove the gunplay element that you would usually expect from first-person or third-person shooter games. You just have instead the movement mechanics and the environment reminiscent of a platformer to concern yourself with. I'm on and off with the platformer genre. I used to enjoy them more, but they were also one of the few genres that would bring out the worst out of me at the time. My preferences over time have shifted me away from the 2D spectrum of platformers, and I don't really enjoy them as much anymore. But as of late, the 3D side of platformers have appealed a lot more to me, or more specifically, first-person ones. Whether I'm playing CSGO Surf or Quake 3 Defrag and sucking at them both equally, or doing a casual run in Mirror's Edge 1, they give off a euphoric feeling that 2D platformers generally can't replicate, and I think it's because of the perspective factor. We see everything in first person, and these games provide a window of that both through another person and another character. These type of games are simplistic in their concept, but the techniques and tricks discovered as more people put in the hours only raises the skill ceiling as more people play them. Minecraft Parkour has been around for quite a while, and yet it has a large community of players that test their levels of endurance, or even something like CS Surf, where we see the community traversing the map for as long as possible and going as fast as possible to sort of get the fastest time. More often than not, the increase in difficulty in these games is often self-inflicted because of the challenges that we impose on ourselves in these type of games. But that's not to say that these games are easy. They're still hard, but are still manageable if you're just playing casually or if you're just in the learning process of getting better. The presence of the competitive scene alone gives viewers a window of what a higher level of play looks like, in the same way as when we see the best of players in the esports scene duke it out. It's mesmerizing, entertaining, and sometimes awe-inspiring to watch. But to get to that level of play can be frustrating. First-person or third-person platformers are just as frustrating as their 2D platformer counterparts. You're fighting against yourself, against the clock, against the milestones ahead of you, against the structure of the level. In first-person ones, you don't have the same frame of reference as a 2D platformer where you're on the edge of a platform. You could fall off the cliff from just timing alone, whereas in a 2D game you have full visibility of the character and the object itself. Most games, ones like Neon White, generally hide the faster routes. You have to be willing to experiment with your abilities and find a way to exploit the game's physics for the sake of a faster run, faster than what the normal route can provide. This is also done in the Mirror's Edge games, done by speedrunners that have put in the hours of the game and have a better understanding of it than the general audience. What helps first-person or third-person platformers grow is general interest from the audience. The recent Rage game, Only Up, blew out of nowhere, getting all different types of people into the experience. In between the number of those players, people with either a competitive or speedrunner mindset have managed to break and evolve the game even after its release, showing other players entirely new ways to play through it. This effect isn't just exclusive to platformer-based games though, it happens in every genre, but platformer-based movement games have a more calm and therapeutic vibe to the experience once you reach that level of gameplay, even in spite of the potential rage that can occur throughout it. Now, to quickly clarify, the camera aspect regarding first-person cameras where you can't gauge how close the character is to the edge of a platform doesn't apply to the third-person counterparts. In 3D third-person platformers, ones like Only Up, you have the whole character that you can see in full view. And usually when it comes to platform-based games, third-person cameras are often preferred, but that's really just what it boils down to at the end of the day, preference. First-person and third-person movement-based platformers both have the same sort of deal to offer. Now, for more clarification on the subject, I'm not really talking about the more traditional 3D platformers that people have grown up with, say Spyro or Crash Bandicoot or Mario or Banjo-Kazooie, but rather the ones inspired by parkour-based movement, or ones like Counter-Strike Surf. Quake 3 Defrag, or Minecraft Parkour. Those type of games are more fast-paced, have lots of movement tech that can be puzzled over and practiced with over time, and have sizable communities with tons of content and support. They can be as casual or as difficult as you want them to be depending on how far you want to go with them. Some are more geared towards speedrunners like Lovely Planet, where the game is quite hard, and with each world, it only becomes more difficult and punishing unless you try to experiment more with the maps, especially if you're trying to get all the stars in that game. The therapy part that comes into play with these games is that once you finally click with the game's sense of movement and its mechanics, the game becomes a lot simpler without it being too boring. You're not in a rush to kill all the enemies or get the player before they get you in this type of environment. It's just you and your ability to move across the map. Even in a game like Cluster Truck, you can play the game without it phasing you if you're just chilling out with some music to unwind. But if you want to sweat it out and grind the scores and play it competitively, then you can do that too, as long as you're willing to put up with the more frustrating aspects of platformers or parkour-based games. The recent surge of these games have also stemmed from the trends currently taking over the current shooter scene, games with a ton of movement and weapon tech that can be discovered to keep the game fresh and interesting as it continues to evolve from the playtime of the player base. The games are all about movement and speed and to some degree a sense of rhythm. Some players that get into a flow state can fly through a map without stopping on any platform or area, like say in CS Surf or Quake 3 Defrag, going at max speeds. It's really cool to watch, and it's even more satisfying to pull it off yourself on a decent run. But those runs that you often see posted are done through countless hours of repetition and experimentation within the game itself. Another appealing aspect of this genre is that it's generally easier to create a working prototype in comparison to other games, or shooters for that matter, because movement and level design become more of a priority. Over time, you could add in some other mechanics to spice up your game, like say a grappling hook or wall running or dashing, or even a basic climbing mechanic, things like that. And some of these games don't even have enemies, it's just more about the skill of pure movement and getting across the platforms effectively. Some games though, like Ghostrunner or Mirror's Edge, do incorporate combat, but Ghostrunner's combat works in tangent with the fast-paced movement because you can't stop for anything, not when you're at the risk of getting popped by the enemies. The first Mirror's Edge game has combat too, but it's a lot more slower paced and it honestly holds the movement back. But in Catalyst, they fixed this problem by making it just as fast as the movement itself once you figure it out. These kind of games are great if you're not really into shooters but enjoy platformers where you can just move about and try to come up with interesting techniques to clear a level faster, or to go on for as long as you can. But if you prefer slower paced games, then I would recommend looking elsewhere. Some 3D platformers are more forgiving though in comparison to the ones that I'm referring to specifically, where you're not rushed to clear it quickly. And to be fair, the same does apply to parkour-based platformer games too, but the end game is to be fast and quick, which is what you see in speedruns or just people that are cracked at it. First-person or third-person 3D parkour-based platformers are fun, incredibly relaxing, and simultaneously frustrating. They are both casual and somewhat competitive. The competitive aspect is more based on the leaderboards and the speedruns that make them competitive, rather than the PvP that people look for in multiplayer games or the co-op experience, mind you. Speedruns and leaderboard systems have always been a fantastic way of making these type of games more competitive. And games like Neon White, Minecraft Parkour, Kill Run, Mirror's Edge, Cyberhook, and Speedrunners from Hell capitalize on this aspect. They're also, for the most part, minimalistic in their presentation and setting. Some games do try to come up with a story and expand the world with lore and detailed backgrounds just for more flair, but they're usually just pretty simple in concept, where you're focused on clearing the map with movement and abilities alone, and sometimes weapons. Sometimes that's all you really want when you don't want to digest too much from a game, just something that you can pick up and play, unwind from a difficult day, and gradually get better at it over time at your own pace. The progression that you usually obtain from these games is skill, where the reward is, well, experience and a better knowledge base of the ins and outs of the game. People that play for a story will look for the platformer-based games or the movement-based games that provide a story, like Cave Story or Portal, A Hat in Time, and yes, even some of the Mario games, that they enjoy for the world, the characters, as well as the fun gameplay that comes from them. But sometimes you just want an endless type of game that goes on for as long as you want it to, say like Geometry Dash for instance. Ultimately, it does just boil down to the gameplay, and games like Cyberhook or Mirror's Edge or Ghostrunner and many others create a unique sense of movement, a seamless experience that can create a calming sensation over time. Say if I see another player drinking Leaf Lover, or if I get bodied in Destiny 2 Crucible and feel the tilt, I can always retreat to these type of games to reboot the mind and move on with the day. Of course, you can still get frustrated depending on how you approach platformers, and you may be better off touching grass instead, but the seamless and therapeutic experience of 3D parkour or 3D platformers with fast movement has a free bird effect where you can just forget everything for a moment. 3D parkour or platformer movement-based games are everything in between: easy, hard, fair, challenging, casual, and competitive. You have people that want to unwind, that want a challenge, that want to break the game by exploiting the hidden mechanics. There is something in them for everybody, and they're at the end of the day proof that you can make a great game with just the movement alone. Thank you for watching.